Kendrick. I was having such a peaceful sleep the night before this song dropped out of nowhere. I almost forgot that this guy was the actual boogeyman. I wake up nice and early for work and my phone is flooded. He's dropped again. Those 3 words, Kendrick dropped again, may end up being the defining phrase of 2024, but once again it was all part of a strategic move from Kendrick, particularly coming right after the announcement that he would be doing the 2025 Super Bowl halftime show, where he explicitly said there will be no round 2s.
You know it's only one opportunity to win a championship. No round 2s. Let's get it.
Because of the events of a few months ago, we've all been basically conditioned to see that Kendrick has dropped and that Drake should prepare for more nukes coming his way. But before I hit play for the first time, I remembered that the beef was done, at least as far as Kendrick is concerned, and throughout it, he had always hinted that this was about something bigger than just Drake. That, coupled with the no round 2s announcement, primed me to expect something that was distinctly not a Drake diss. And whilst Drake does get a couple shots here and there in passing, the scope of this song is so much wider than that. It's an intentional shift of focus away from Drake, zooming out from this one individual to comment on what Kendrick clearly believes is a systemic and poisonous discourse in the music industry. The artwork is cryptic and low resolution, as were the artworks for 616 in LA and Meet the Grahams, and this new track does share some stylistic similarities with these two. The image is a random eBay listing for a pair of battered, blacked out Air Force Ones. Now if you know, you know, and I was born and raised in London, so I most definitely do know what blacked out Air Force Ones stereotypically communicates and means. Violence. Simple as that.
Step on a nigga in my Air Force Ones.
And that is most definitely a prevailing theme of the song, whether metaphorically or literally. Interestingly, Kendrick chose to drop this song on his Instagram feed during this year's VMAs. Considering the content and thesis of the song, a targeted attempt to shift focus away from the quote-unquote industry that he spends the next 5.5 minutes dissecting. Sonically, the beat is eerie, but not in the same way as something like Meet the Grahams, more eerie with an underlying sense of melancholy. Not to mention, it's also just a beautiful instrumental. The opening line, and at the time of recording this video, de facto title of the song, is such a succinct communication and metaphor for what Kendrick is doing.
I think it's time to watch the party die.
Once again communicates the long-running motif of Kendrick being the silent observer, whether as a teenager witnessing gang violence or as a rapper within the hip-hop industry. Watching the party die is also a more general reference to his beef with Drake. The beef was the quote-unquote party. In Not Like Us, they partied, and now that's dead. The beef is over, we move forward possibly to a new Kendrick project. Important to note as well that this idea was alluded to in Meet the Grahams, when he addressed Drake with the
Dear Hybrid, I know you probably thinking I wanted to crash your party.
The party in this instance is the world Kendrick thinks far too many rappers, including Drake, inhabits. The facade and allure of glamour rather than pursuit of art is that party. The party that Kendrick sees has gone on for way too long.
The shit that got too wicked to apologize. It's different getting whacked than disqualified.
Is again, of course, a reference to Kendrick's brutal takedown of Drake during the height of the beef. But it's done and dusted now. The violence has already been perpetrated past the point of forgiveness, as if Kendrick sees what he did as a necessary evil to inject life into this industry or to just start afresh. His scope then begins to slowly widen as we continue throughout the first verse. Burn a whole village, we start over, it's really that time. Why reason with these if they can't see the future first? Why argue with these clowns if the circus is well at work? Initially, the image that popped into my head was Kendrick's description of an apocalyptic wasteland on Untitled 1 from Untitled Unmastered, where he explicitly describes in detail the end of days in biblical fashion. On this new song, it seems like Kendrick comes to the realization that he must be the one to end it. To live in the new, ideal world, the old one must crumble. It's far too gone as he sees it. Also, saying that they can't see the future first could be a reference to the Like That track, with Future being the first song in the beef that kicked everything off. The clown bar is also a retort to Drake claiming that Kendrick and his camp were clowns and being fed false info on the Heart Part 6. Kendrick then goes on to hammer home the point that Meet the Grahams and Not Like Us hinted at. He says,
Just walk that man down, that'll do everyone a solid. It's love, but tough love sometimes gotta result in violence.
Just walk that man down, of course, being both a reference to this line on Euphoria and this line on Not Like Us. Doing everyone a solid implies that Kendrick sees what he did to Drake as a favor to the rap industry. Someone had to break the illusion in order to steer the music industry, particularly the rap game, to a better place. On Euphoria, he did say it's always been about love and hate. And initially, of course, we all think his love and hate relationship with Drake particularly. But with this new track, it feels that the love Kendrick refers to is his love for hip-hop as an art form, and the hate is the disingenuous relationship some artists and influencers have with rap. If you parade in gluttony without giving truth to the youth, the graveyard is company, just tell us what casket to choose. What the fuck? That is just a ridiculously cold bar, just the way it rolls off the tongue. Conceptually, it's telling about what Kendrick believes rap does and has the potential to do. Parading in gluttony without giving truth to the youth, aka reaping the financial benefits of hip-hop without giving back, without acknowledging what the art form actually is and its historical significance. Some of the following bars are direct shots at what a lot of people would describe as culture vultures with insidious intent. Influencers talk down because I'm not with the basic shit, but they don't hate me, they hate the man that I represent, the type of man that never dick ride because I want a favor. A reference to a string of influencers who are not hearing what Kendrick was saying during that beef. The first kind of people that come to mind is people like DJ Vlad and Adam22, and of course DJ Academics. The ones who follow the numbers and the money, who blindly follow those with the most money because they can get in on it, hopefully. I also think this might be a flipped projection of Kendrick himself. They don't hate me, they hate the man I represent applies to those who don't have rap's interests at heart, of course. But I think it applies to Kendrick during the beef, in the sense that it was never about him hating Drake, but what Drake represents. Drake being a byproduct or a symptom of the commodification of the art of rap. He then issues a metaphorical call to arms to those who do have a passion and care and love for rap. The man that resides in patience, so where the soldiers at, the ones that lost it all and learnt to learn from that, a thirst for life, head inside a book because he's concerned with that, information that will change his life because he yearns for that. Those who have experienced hardship, value learning and growing is who Kendrick is trying to speak to. An explicit attempt to pry the control of the industry away from opportunists to real people. If you want to link it back to Drake, that Soldier's bar could be a retort to Drake saying he's a war-seasoned general with jackets covered in medals on the Heart Part 6, with Kendrick offering an alternative to the qualities an actual soldier would have, a thirst for life and knowledge. Kendrick goes on to basically just call men trash.
I feel for the women that deal with the clown and nerd shit. Can't blame them, today they ain't really got much to work with.
That, like so many of the previous diss songs, is rooted in the themes of Mr. Morale, the kind of characters Kendrick satirized and exaggerated and dissected on We Cry Together, for example. He ends the verse by saying he'd trade all of these guys for Nipsey Hussle, and that he can't be proud of these people. Nipsey was, of course, well known for being an active, prevalent member of his community, regularly giving back to the people and city that raised him. On the hook, Kendrick issues a plea to God for peace from the lame people in the industry, once again separating himself from what he sees as earthly desires, money, fame, and a gluttonous appetite for surface-level validation. The second verse is where we see Kendrick use stark, violent imagery in an attempt to purge the industry from vultures. Both the street and the corporate guys, he needs their families mortified. Crazy bar, ridiculous bar. A wide-ranging attack on a hip-hop culture that now thrives on pettiness, excess, and sometimes just lies.
The flashy nigga with nasty decisions, using money as a backbone. I want his head cracked before he's back home.
Immediately reminds me of this line on You Ain't Gotta Lie from T-Pab. Those who use money solely as a personality trait, who only garner any sort of acclaim or respect because of the sheer fact they have wealth. Also a reference to the Meet the Grahams line where he says money has always been an illusion. I want his head cracked before he gets home is a sinister fucking line, and is another jab at Kendrick's long-running claim of Drake being a foreign colonizer in the rap industry. Kendrick then spits the most violent portion of the track before envisioning a new utopian world. The radio personality pushing propaganda for salary. Let me know when they turn up as a casualty. I want agony, assault, and battery. What the fuck? Widely speculated to be a line about DJ Academics. As previously mentioned, I would also apply this to the likes of an Adam 22 or a DJ Vlad. He wants all of these characters gone. They don't belong in hip-hop in his eyes, and the state of the industry would be much better off without their existence. Kendrick then describes an ideal world to live in, a new earth where people try to make humanity work. But the conflict at the heart of it is to get to that place, Kendrick must inflict this metaphorical violence on the ones dragging the culture down into what he sees as degeneracy. The brutality and tragedy of this passage is particularly striking when you take into context his previous music. To Pimp a Butterfly was the attempt to change the world through protest, education, and history. But now, the industry is too cooked to hear that message. At the end of Mr. Morale, he seemingly gives up on that mission to save the industry. He tried and failed. But now this new, darker version of himself sees the only way to achieve it is through this metaphorical violence against those who actively perpetrate destructive behaviors. Kendrick continues the biblical references in the final verse, asking what would Lecrae do? Lecrae, for those who don't know, is one of the most significant figures in the Christian hip-hop scene. Lecrae very recently gave his 2 cents on the Kendrick and Drake beef, where he described Drake as a fan of the culture and Kendrick as a product of the culture.
Fuck these niggas up or show them just what prayer do.
It's just one in a long-running line of conflicted themes in Kendrick's discography. On What's Wrong with Isaiah Rashad from 2016, for example, he rapped,
"Depending on the way I feel, I might kill everybody around me, might heal everybody around me, how the wind blow."
And it seems now his conclusion that it must be both. To heal is to kill first, and Kendrick sees it as his curse and duty to do so. We settle hard disputes today. The ghetto Hollywood divorce is him attempting to sever those ties between the quote-unquote real ones and the corporate world. The ghetto and Hollywood must be severed from one another before this new vision of hip-hop can blossom. Also, this might be a reference to the Outkast track of the same name, Hollywood Divorce, a song that explicitly describes the predatory relationship Hollywood has with the trauma of ghetto life. Interestingly, these bars are spat by the song's feature, which is Lil Wayne, whom Kendrick has always cited as a major influence. On Hollywood Divorce, Lil Wayne spits, "I really think they're stealing from us like a sample song. I really wish one day we'd take it back like Hammer's Home." Wayne directly calls out culture vultures and wishes to reclaim hip-hop and repossess it from colonizers. The irony and tragedy for Kendrick here is that Lil Wayne is one of his idols who went out of his way to deliver the same message Kendrick is trying to on this new track. But Lil Wayne's most successful student and protege appears to be the face of the ills he's describing. Kendrick continues the culture vulture bars by claiming the culture is filled with carnivores snacking on our faces. More overtly apocalyptic imagery once again. It's also a flip on Kendrick's bar from 616, where he claimed that the industry is cooked and he's picking the carcass apart. They wonder why I'm not enthused to drop. The more visible you get, the more your spiritual is tried. When Kendrick drops anything, it feels like an event because of how rarely it happens. Here we get a peek as to why Kendrick remains such a reclusive figure. We know that Kendrick has said he takes his own time and he wants to be inspired, genuinely inspired, before he drops anything. But here he tells us it's not just that. He's attempting to limit his exposure as much as possible to a cynical industry that only cares about image and numbers. The temptation that weighs down upon his spirit, apparently. Kendrick then goes on to describe something of a fatigue within himself.
It's critical, I know my physical is tested all the time, I'm pitiful.
Continuing the motif about him not being enthused and having some sort of internal conflict, only now it's seeped into the physical realm. This is where the themes of 616 and Kendrick's back catalogue become particularly prevalent. He describes the choice of entering this warfare, this battle, as a relapse. He'd maintained a life of relative peace and now feels he's tragically been called back into action through a duty to rap. The song then builds up to the tragic conclusion it has been building up to since its opening verse. Kendrick picks himself up through the words and encouragement of close friends, namely longtime collaborator and producer Terrace Martin. Someone by the name of Jay Estrada is name dropped, possibly a friend or associate of Kendrick's who follows him on Twitter apparently. He confirms to Kendrick that the only solution is to level the entire game, begin from ground zero and rebuild from square one. Kendrick ends the song by rapping, "Locking into what I trust, looking outside. The kids live tomorrow because today the party just died." Kendrick accepts that as hip-hop stands now, the kids don't have a chance. If that party continues in the shape it does now, the kids will enter a wasteland of excess and opportunists. The hopeful glimmer is Kendrick declaring that the party is in fact now dead. On the face of it, that's a pessimistic conclusion to this tale. But because the song explicitly tells us that the party must die before the next generation can have a chance at success, the fact it is dead is the light at the end of the tunnel. Almost 10 years ago now, Kendrick sought to usher in change and revolution in hip-hop through education on To Pimp a Butterfly. That ship has sailed, as previously mentioned on Mr. Morale, and Kendrick has had to rely on his last resort, violence. Metaphorically. I don't think Kendrick wants to kill off hip-hop, of course, and this song does of course have some shots at Drake, but he reduces Drake's position in the quote-unquote party as just being the loudest in a room filled with similar characters. What he's trying to do, what was hinted at throughout the beef, is shatter the illusion and question the relationship between artists and fans and the industry. Remove the facade of money and fame and actually question what's lurking underneath. It's like imagining a giant extravagant mansion. It looks classy and full of substance, but you take a closer look and its foundations have been gnawed away at for years by termites. If you want to build a house that will last, you need to demolish that standing structure. It also feels like a eulogy. Kendrick is effectively eulogizing an industry he previously aspired to be a part of as a young rapper. And it's because of that aspect that this song feels inherently tied to one of Kendrick's most underrated songs, The Heart Part 3. Released days before Good Kid Mad City, which was his major label debut, and by virtue of that, his entrance to this industry he seeks to rebuild. On The Heart Part 3, he pleads to his audience to not let hip-hop die when his debut album drops, whilst describing the fight between perseverance and sedation.
When the whole world see you as Pac reincarnated, that's enough pressure to live your whole life sedated.
He later goes on to say, I need a better way to take your fans now. I need to kill you motherfuckers dead. 12 years ago, he rapped about the need to inflict metaphorical violence on his rivals to breathe new life into hip-hop. He then goes on to rap that he needs to separate himself to stand out, a direct parallel to this bar from the new track.
Dear God, draw the line, they trying to confuse them with me.
These feel like the bookends to Kendrick's relationship with the quote-unquote industry. He entered with the knowledge that he has to go to extraordinary lengths to both separate himself as an artist and avoid the temptations the industry has to offer. And he spent the next 12 years navigating that industry and those struggles, attempting to find any avenue he could to achieve his goal. Unfortunately, as he said on 616, the industry is cooked and now violence is the only way. I do believe this track will most likely tie in conceptually to whatever Kendrick is working on next. There are strong murmurs of an album coming soon, and this, alongside the Super Bowl announcement, only adds fuel to that fire. But this will perhaps be an even more telling album than Mr. Morale, the album where he set himself free from the pressure to save an industry, later coming to the realization that he has to be the one to crumble it. Whatever this next album will be, will most certainly build on this theme, having Kendrick existing in, or perhaps still envisioning, a new world and working towards a revolutionized version of the industry. And once again, and I have no doubts about this, Kendrick will find a way to completely reinvent himself.